Hey, 3 o'clock only rolls around once a day, and it's that time. It is 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. The Southside Beat is here. My name is Crisan. Chris Halicke might be joining us within the next 15 minutes or so. He is a busy bee as of right now. So we may hear from Chris, we may not, but good to have you all with us here. Beautiful day out in the Pittsburgh area. It feels like spring. It feels almost like summer. It feels really good out here. And of course, in about a week and a half's time, we will be convening on the south side, we as in the Steelers, for rookie minicamp and getting to know some of these rookies and getting to know this new draft class, getting to know some of the undrafteds. And the topic that I wanted to address yesterday before Omar Khan went on Pat McAfee's show to talk about potential wide receiver trades, or as he might say, a current quiet front on there. I wanted to talk about Ryan Watts. And when you go back to day 3 of the draft on Saturday, I'm sitting in the media room. I'm looking at who's available. I'm looking at what the Steelers have done. I'm looking at who possibly could be, the next in terms of that defensive backs room. It felt pretty foregone as day 3 was going on that they were going to look at cornerbacks. They were going to look at defensive backs in day 3. Obviously, once things unfolded, days 1 and 2, Troy Fautanu, first round, heavily scouting tackles, as Chris reported, as we tried to tell you all. They were looking at tackles, and boom, they get a tackle. Then they draft Zach Frazier, of course, center, a massive need. Massive need. And they go out and get consensus top 3, likely top 2, could be top 1 in this draft. And then they get Roman Wilson, who was somebody that Mike Tomlin was all over from the moment the Senior Bowl started up in Mobile. And Mike Tomlin fell in love with Roman Wilson in the process. And that's not to say that Roman's not a good player and Tomlin just blindly fell in love with somebody. Roman Wilson's somebody that was very productive at Michigan and brings a lot of good qualities. Then you fall into Peyton Wilson, who wasn't really supposed to be there at 98. And if he had a second ACL, he probably wouldn't have been. Had the best tape of any linebacker. So days 1 and 2 of the draft brought tremendous value for all of those positions that they accounted for. And then you go to day 3. Now, Mason McCormick, okay, being the insurance at guard, taken with the 4th round pick in day 3. That caught some people off guard. It certainly caught me off guard. At the time, I thought they were going to look at cornerback. I thought they were going to look at defensive tackle. But they picked up a player who they felt was really solid in terms of how they had him rated versus where they were positioned to pick. And then you think about the position flexibility and the need that's opening up next offseason, as Chris and I have talked about over the last couple of days in terms of Mason McCormick. And then you roll down the list, you get into the 6th round. And for me, my eye keeps itching. I can't stop itching it. For me, when that Logan Lee pick came around, I actually thought, and I said this to the person that was sitting next to me, I thought it was going to be Christian Boyd. I thought that was a player that would have fit them in the zero technique, that would have fit them on the nose, but it's apparent they say Keanu Benton is fit for that position. Logan Lee, to me, is more of a defensive end. You could play him more on the end, alongside Alex Highsmith or alongside TJ Watt to kind of help open up those gaps, so to speak. And then they came to the last round, and it felt like, or that last pick, rather, in the 6th round. And it felt like they were going to, go after a defensive back there. Now, we were kind of joking, at least Chris and I, at a certain point in the draft, talking about who's going to pick up at DB. And then day 3 comes around, and I was talking with another reporter in the room too. And I'm like, hey, Devonshire from Pitt's still on the board. And obviously, Mike Tomlin knows MJ Devonshire well. And we know the Steelers like picking up people they know. They like picking up family. They like picking up friends. They stayed away from it, and they took Ryan Watts. And when you look at Ryan Watts, he just fits the build of these cornerbacks that they have gone to the well for recently, especially over the last 2 years. As of right now, there are 5 cornerbacks out of 10 on the Steelers roster that measure above 6'1", and 180 pounds. Let me repeat that, okay? There are 5 out of 10 cornerbacks on the Steelers' current roster that are listed at either taller than 6'1" or 6'1" or taller and 180 pounds or heavier. Those measurements, 6'1", 180, are what Luke Barku measures at. He was XFL, I think, Defensive Player of the Year, or All XFL, rather, in 2023 in the spring, and the Steelers signed him to the practice squad. He's considered the 5th largest cornerback they officially have now, when you factor in Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, Darius Rush, and now Ryan Watts. Ryan Watts at the NFL Combine is one of those avatar guys that Mike Tomlin talked about last summer when he was talking about Joey Porter and Corey Trice. 6'3", 208 pounds at the NFL Combine. That's what Watts measured in. Nearly identical to what Trice measured at, 6'3", 206 at last year's NFL Combine, and it's larger than Porter in both height and weight. Then you look at the arm length. Watts' arms measured at 34.5 inches long at the Combine. Trice was at 32 3/8, and Porter's were at 34. So they found a longer version of Joey Porter and Corey Trice in the 6th round. They found a longer, and look, Mark says it here, Beanie Bishop, quote unquote, a bit undersized, 5'11", 175. Weight-wise, probably, but 5'11" matches up to quite a lot of wide receivers in the NFL. And if you look at who's around the AFC North, the Browns' largest wide receiver is Cedric Tillman at 6'3", 215. The Ravens is Sean Ryan at 6'3", 200. T. Higgins with the Bengals is 6'4", 219. Those are the largest stature as far as that goes. Wide receivers in the AFC North. So the Steelers are stacking size with size here. Now, Woods says Watts is a total specimen. Here's the thing about Ryan Watts, and this is why I think we talked about this in last year's draft, where you looked at the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounders that fell into day 3, and it's like, well, why is this guy here? It's conventional wisdom here in a way, where they are 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks because they're not good enough, per se, to be 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks or 4th round picks. And what I mean by that is this. Ryan Watts, while he's physically imposing, 6'3", over 200 pounds, doesn't move well for a cornerback. He does not have the hip rotation, doesn't have the footwork, doesn't have the speed or the quickness that you might expect from a cornerback. And now Mark brings up this point. I heard he could play safety. That's his most likely avenue now. If he can run downhill and hit and tackle, that's what the Steelers are going to look for. And I wrote about this late last night into this morning, about Ryan Watts and these avatars, so to speak. Thinking about how Minkah Fitzpatrick's kind of used all over the field. Thinking about how Deshaun Elliott played a quarter of his snaps in the box last year for Miami. Like, they're going to utilize the size that they have on the outside and help bring some of that inside so they can free up Minkah Fitzpatrick and they can free up Deshaun Elliott at safety a little bit more. Now, it could be argued that they need to go back in for safety depth. Obviously, they have Trenton Thompson. Obviously, Eric Rowe's still out there. But they're going to have to find somebody to comfortably, I think would be a good word to make it, is a third safety. And Reginald asks, will Watts make the team? Think about last year, right? If Corey Trice didn't get hurt in training camp, all of their draft picks would have made the 53-man roster. All of the draft picks were on pace to make it. In fact, Dylan Cook made it. Dylan Cook wasn't drafted. He was an undrafted free agent. He made the 53-man roster to start things out. So they felt so strongly about that draft class last year, where if Trice didn't get hurt in training camp, he would have been on the 53. They would have had all of their draft picks on the 53. So will Watts make the team is the question from Reginald. You have to look at the cornerback depth, right? Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson are your probable starters. You look at Luke Barku as somebody that was there last year. Watts now to go in with Rush. Like, there's options now. Beanie Bishop is intrigue. As Mark says, he feels Bishop will make the 53 and complete for a nickel spot. Very possible. Very possible. This cornerbacks room has gone through so much turnover this offseason. I think it's somewhat getting ignored maybe not ignored, but it's definitely not being prioritized in conversation. It's not top of mind conversation because of what's happened in the quarterback room, QB room, the wide receiver room, of course, with trading Deontay Johnson, and what's happened with the middle linebackers and getting Peyton Wilson, and what's happened with the offensive line and getting rid of Mason Cole and then drafting Fautanu and Frazier. Like, so much movement has happened on this roster that we almost haven't gotten a chance to sit and really diagnose the cornerbacks. But adding Ryan Watts is pattern now. Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan have identified something with these physically imposing cornerbacks where you look at the wide receivers that are around the AFC North, the Steelers stack up physically to just about any team now. And you look at the skill set that they have. Joey Jr. is going to be the top cornerback at 6'3". Dante Jackson, I think he's like 5'10". And then you have options like Trice and Rush. And then, yeah, if Beanie Bishop is good enough, and that's kind of a diamond in the rough undrafted free agency ad, maybe he can slide into the slot. They certainly, if anything, got younger with that cornerbacks room this offseason. When you look at Porter, Dante Jackson, you look at Trice, who's going into his second year. Porter's going into his second year. Rush will be in his second year. Now Watts going into his first year. Bishop going into his first year. They got really significantly younger in that secondary, and then especially doubly so when you consider that they didn't bring Keanu Neal back and they added in Deshaun Elliott. Like, they added youth there at that safety position. Of course, DeMonte KZ, I can't leave him out either. Going to the comments here for a couple more. Woods brings up Spencer Anderson. Was the 7th last year and got a helmet every game. Absolutely he did. And he showed versatility. He showed durability. And Dylan Cook got helmets in some weeks too, utilizing on the special teams team. So, yeah, I mean, if you have a draft pick that you feel strongly enough about with position versatility, when it comes to those late rounders, they have to be able to play special teams. They have to be able to do more than just play their natural position and be depth. So Spencer Anderson showed that. I think Ryan Watts certainly could show that as well. Tenchi brings up, do the Steelers still need to sign or trade for a cornerback or just use what they have? I don't think cornerback is the priority right now, at least when it comes to who's going to be added next. I think there are still veteran options out there. I don't have a list in front of me right now, obviously. I think there are going to be options that the Steelers can turn to, but it's very clear their priority right now is to go add at wide receiver. They addressed offensive line in the draft. They addressed linebacker in the draft. They addressed, wide receiver in a way in the draft. They addressed at least one spot of it. And then, of course, they addressed later on defensive line and secondary. They checked off a lot of boxes in the draft. I think the next box they have to check in the draft, as Chris and I kind of talked about yesterday with Omar Khan being on, Pat McAfee's show and talking about, the trade market, or as he might say, lack thereof right now. I still think they need a true complement to George Pickens out there. I think they need somebody else that can stretch the field, that can run into the middle of the field, run routes into the intermediate. And I think they need somebody along that line still. Let's see. What else do we have? Josh says, I would not mind Pat P coming back as a mentor. Still possible at this stage. Now, it depends on kind of what they do at wide receiver, because number one, they could trade for one and keep that contract. Or number two, they can go out and pay another one. So it kind of depends on what they do at wide receiver first. And it's clear that that's a priority for them right now. It's clear for them that that's a position that they want to upgrade in the short term. Maybe not by rookie minicamp next week, but at least by OTAs, you would think. They would want a move to happen. Tenchi says, hopefully DK Metcalf or Ayuk, if that wasn't a smokescreen of some sort. I don't think Seattle's going to be looking to deal DK Metcalf. Brandon Ayuk, I mean, it's been floated around for weeks now. The 49ers don't seem like they want to trade him. We'll see. It's all, everybody has a price, right? Where are my wrestling fans at, right? $1 Million Man. Everybody has a price. I'm not going to do the laugh because I don't have that capability right now. But, I don't think it's going to be Ayuk at this stage. Mark says clickbait about wide receivers ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, every little rumor is going to get some ground now. It's the NFL offseason. That's just, kind of how thing works. Let's take a little sip of drink here. Let's see, Mr. Nick of Time. Good time to get questions in, by the way, as some of you are doing. No, Chris, it's just me. Good time to get some questions in. Good time to ask about the draft, ask about free agency, ask about upcoming camps, ask about anything, really. Ask about my golf game. I don't know. Pick something. Mr. Nick of Time says, would the Steelers sign Justin Simmons? He could play slot too, right? Wasn't Simmons signed, or am I thinking of somebody else? Let's see. Let me do a quick Google on that. I don't remember if Simmons was signed yet or not, or unless I'm thinking of someone else. Let's see. Okay, so Simmons is still out there. I don't know who I'm thinking of. But anyway, they certainly could. He could play slot, but at this stage, I'm not sure if they're looking at the top of the line cornerbacks or the top of the line slot guys right now. I think what they're looking at is someone bona fide to add outside again. If they wanted to get a slot corner, they could have drafted one. Pretty plain and simple about that. Let's see. Stephen A., good question. What are your thoughts on Najee's 50-year option and how the Steelers haven't picked it up yet? I think they're going to pick it up. Maybe they have and they just haven't announced it yet. Or maybe they've made the decision to do that and just haven't announced it yet. I feel like it's a no-brainer to pick it up just from the sole fact of look at what they just did in the draft. Look at exactly what they just built this offense around. They built it around running the ball around those two, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. And now, I think that they're going to have to find a way, not just to pay Najee down the road, but picking up this 50-year option seems like the safest thing to do at this stage. Lifted asks, are you taking Drake or Kendrick? I haven't listened to either track yet, so I can't form an opinion right now, Lifted, but good question. Mark asks, what do you think of the undrafted quarterback, John Reese Plumlee? Decent signing bonus, 3-possession flexible like Taysom Hill. When I saw that signing bonus, I think it was $35,000. I was like, whoa, that's quite the number. That was pretty steep for me. I was a little shocked to see that value that high. What do I think about him? I think that if they didn't see something like flexibility, it wouldn't be the first time a quarterback's moved to tight end or a quarterback's moved around, at the NFL level. If they see somebody like that as a versatile kind of gadget weapon, remember Kendrick Green at fullback last training camp, how fun that was? He's not going to be a fullback here, but point is, if they find football players that they like, Mike Tomlin often talks about football players, right? And talks about guys that are athletes and can play football rather than, being specialized at a position. Like if John Reese Plumlee has some value as a slot guy or wildcat or whatever it is, that Taysom Hill role, all right, maybe they experiment with it in Latrobe and it's no skin off their back at the end of the day. They're not really committed to him. So I found that kind of fascinating. Not that they signed him because they were always going to add a fourth quarterback, with that undrafted process. They were always going to add a fourth quarterback there. But I was a little surprised to see the amount of money that they exactly paid him. So we shall see exactly what their plan is for Plumlee. And certainly I'll get to see him during rookie minicamp. I'm looking forward to that as well. Nelson asks, might the Steelers trade Daniels and a mid-round pick for a wide receiver and start McCormick? I wouldn't bet on that. I don't think they're going to look to trade James Daniels just because they drafted Mason McCormick. I don't think that's a one-to-one cause and effect kind of thing that they're looking at. I think they're pretty confident with going into Latrobe with James Daniels as a starting right guard again. And I think they're pretty content with having Mason McCormick, so to speak, take a redshirt year. Oftentimes with these day 3 picks, it's a redshirt kind of year. It's another year to develop. And I think that Mason McCormick has a pathway to play in the future with the Steelers. I just don't think it's right now. Mr. Nick at Times says Plumlee did a podcast earlier, said the Steelers wanted to develop him as a quarterback only and had a Zoom meeting with Omar, Mike Tomlin, and Arthur Smith pre-draft. I'll have to see where that podcast is because I have not seen that. But if so, then all right. If they want to develop him as a quarterback, okay. We knew they were going to pick up a third one or a fourth one rather. It's just a matter kind of how. Brian says, I wouldn't mind another wide receiver via trade, but do the Steelers really need one? Art's offense is very 12 personnel heavy. We have a lot of speed in the room where guys will be open on play action. Here's my thing about 12 personnel. Okay. Like, I get it. They might not need to go spread and they might not need that third wide receiver. You know, they can deal with Pickens and Wilson out there and then deal with having either Najee or Jalen out there instead of doing 22. Like, what about the tight ends room? How far do they feel Darnell Washington has come along as a pass catcher to be behind Pat Freiermuth? Or how good do they feel about Connor Hayward as like an H-back type thing, fullback tight end hybrid behind Pat Freiermuth? I'm curious to note the tight end usage because in Atlanta, if you recall, there were some people that were ruffling feathers over the usage of not just Bijan Robinson, but also Kyle Pitts, and how Jonnu Smith kind of got a little more run than Kyle Pitts did. So I'm curious to see how they more or less use 2 tight end sets and not really with 12. Like, I think 12 and 13 personnel are going to just happen in certain instances. But I think the usage of the tight ends, and in particular where Freiermuth lines up, is going to have a really big trickle-down effect on the offense. They didn't touch the tight ends room this offseason. As of right now, it's basically still Freiermuth, Washington, Hayward, and Rodney Williams. So Joshua says he's overly comfortable with the tight end room, and I think that's fair. I want to see Darnell Washington grow more as a pass catcher. Like, I want to see him get more routes and get more targets and be utilized a little bit more as a passing weapon and not just as he calls himself a 6 offensive lineman. You know, I just don't want to I just don't want him to be pigeonholed into that. So that's what I'm thinking about. I think the fastest 40 at the combine for a quarterback, believe it or not, was Keaton Slovis of BYU/Pitt. Randy brings up John Reese Plumlee's 40 time here. Chris is joining us. Let's get him in. Chris, we are in the middle of talking about basically like late round picks, undrafted guys. Oh, I forgot Michael Pruitt. Thank you, Reed. Forgot about Michael Pruitt. And there was a question brought up about 12 personnel. And I kind of transitioned it into a point about talking about the tight ends room because to me, I think a big part of what Arthur Smith wanted to do in Atlanta was utilize his tight ends. And some people were getting angry to the point where Jonnu Smith was getting more run than Kyle Pitts was. And of course, Tyler Algier getting more run than Bijan Robinson sometimes.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating schematically what Arthur Smith could do. They didn't touch this tight ends room in the offseason aside from Michael Pruitt, as Biggie mentions here. So I'm curious how they're going to kind of use them. And then the name John Reese Plumlee has come up because of the potential, like, you know, athleticism, quarterback, Taysom Hill kind of thing.
Well, from what I heard, and I don't know how accurate this is, and we'll find out pretty soon since rookie minicamp isn't just, just over a week, really. From what I heard, that rookie quarterback is going to play quarterback. I don't think they're asking him to do any other positions. So we'll see. I mean, obviously we can hear from the horse's mouth whenever, again, rookie camp is, a week from Friday. So I wouldn't expect him to play another position. When it comes to the tight end room, it is a little interesting to see what the Steelers are going to do. We obviously know what Freiermuth's going to be to a certain extent. I'm curious to see how they use him. A bit differently, because they need to get more production out of him because he's talented enough to be a more productive tight end. I don't know, like if you're talking like top 5 tight end or anything like that in the league, but when you're talking about a legitimate receiving threat, Freiermuth is absolutely that. He's talented enough to do that.
Sure.
But then when you talk about Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward, and Pruitt, those guys all kind of, at least when it comes to, I don't know as much about Pruitt, obviously, but Washington has a calling card. It's block first guy. Hayward has a calling card of being kind of this, hybrid guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. But he's also not your traditional size tight end either. So that is a very curious position. And I think really any kind of guesses at what the team would try to do now is just that. It's a guess. Until we really kind of see and get from Arthur Smith. And even then, when we get to training camp and we hear what Arthur Smith or who anybody else, Alfredo Roberts or anybody else has to say about the tight end position, I think even then it's going to be a bit of conjecture until we actually watch a preseason game and be like, okay, that might be, now we might get a little bit of an idea of what the tight ends are going to be doing.
Yeah. Mike in Texas has any word on when they will give out numbers. He wants to order a Zach Frazier jersey. Usually they announce them like in a batch, like, hey, here's what our rookies are doing. I know Faltanu's going 76.
Yeah.
I want to say Frazier's sticking with 54, but don't quote me on that. Don't spend any money because I said that.
I think I saw that somewhere on social media, but I didn't see it officially from the Steelers.
They haven't announced them yet. Is the point. So,
they have not.
When rookie minicamp comes around, I'm sure you will see photo, video of, whatever.
They'll be wearing their practice jerseys, so they'll have a number by then. So,
yeah. How's Corey Trice doing? Is what Casey asks. Fine, as far as I can tell.
So
everything seems to be on track.
They have had the first phase. I think they're in phase 2 now, but the first phase of the offseason program, players are allowed to do like strength and conditioning stuff. So they're allowed to like get on the field and do like conditioning workouts and stuff like that. And Corey Trice Jr. was participating in those. Like there are pictures on the Steelers website of him like running and participating with those things. So I would assume that he's doing okay, that he's at least tracking in the right direction. We'll see whenever actual football activity begins, like in OTAs and especially minicamp, and then obviously especially training camp.
Yeah.
But in terms of mobility and stuff like that, like he's participating in workouts, so that's a good sign.
I don't know this rule here. You might not. I don't know. Yeah. Since he was injured last year, could Corey Trice theoretically do rookie minicamp again? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I didn't think so either.
Now, granted, there are some veteran players that are invited to participate in rookie minicamp, so that's a little curious to me. I don't know how much that line. I honestly don't know the exact details of that line, but I think when it comes to, I don't think if that happens, then okay, cool. But I don't think it's anything where the Steelers are going to be, especially when you're talking about Trice or Cole Holcomb, who are both coming off of serious injuries.
Sure, yeah.
Where you're looking at, okay, we got to rush them to get that. Like, no, let's just continue to go through the regular offseason program. Holcomb might be a little bit further behind because obviously his injury came much later, and I think his injury was much more serious than just a regular torn ACL. So. I don't think that's really necessary, to be completely honest. I think if he just goes through if he can go through the regular like 3 weeks of OTAs and minicamp week and be a regular participant in those, nothing more, nothing less, I think that's a good sign for Trice.
I don't think this is like a Hakeem Butler situation. Remember Hakeem Butler, who played, full season at XFL. They brought him in for, a tryout essentially, and made it through rookie minicamp, got into training camp, and then was released. Like, I don't think this is that kind of situation. Javante asked, shot in the dark, what if Darnell Washington is the swing tackle?
Everybody get Darnell Washington as a tackle out of your head. Just get it. I constantly get that question.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
I don't know what that fascination is. I understand he's a very, very large, like way larger than a normal tight end, but in order to fill out to be a typical tackle, he would have to gain a lot of weight. And it's not just size and length, it's also about technique. There's a huge difference between being the tight end and having to block the edge rusher than to be the tackle and to have to deal with all of the responsibilities that a tackle has to deal with when it comes to run blocking, pass protection, pulling, especially when you're looking at the tackles that the Steelers have now. Even Dan Moore Jr. is a better tackle than Darnell Washington. That's not even like, some people may like, are you kidding me? What are you smoking?
That's not like a Dan Moore defense point.
It's just Dan Moore has 4 seasons of playing tackle. Darnell Washington has 1 season of playing tight end.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. That's not grasping at straws or anything.
Lee asked, do you see a Quan Alexander re-signing for depth? I do not. After they drafted Peyton Wilson, that room's, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Cole Holcomb, Quan Alexander, or Cole Holcomb, Elandon Roberts, and Mark Robinson. I don't think it's happening. I would expect
another signing of some kind just for depth purposes, because yes, like the room looks really good right now with Queen, Wilson, Roberts, Holcomb, like those 4, assuming Holcomb is healthy, and then Mark Robinson as like the 5th guy. I wouldn't even mind the Steelers to bring in another guy like a Miles Jack type or a Quan Alexander type that can be the 5th guy on the depth chart. But I don't think Quan Alexander is going to come into a situation in which he is willingly already the 5th linebacker on the depth chart.
Yeah.
Especially if he has an opportunity to go somewhere else to be the 3rd or the 4th. Now, if Cole Holcomb's not healthy and he's behind and the Steelers don't feel like he's going to be ready for start of the season, and could you convince Quan Alexander to come in and be the 4th guy? Maybe, possibly. But that to me is like the bare minimum in terms of like where he would be on the depth chart to reunite with Holcomb or with Alexander.
And I think Alexander's still rehabbing too. Like,
yeah, I mean,
you're talking relatively late in the season as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Achilles injury. It's yeah.
And they just paid top dollar for Patrick Queen, so they're not going to go pay more top dollar for another linebacker.
It would be depth purposes. Now, granted, they got absolutely decimated by injuries at that position last year, and so I'm sure fans are concerned about, well, what if Queen goes down? What if Wilson goes down? What if Roberts goes down? And
little PTSD involved there,
right? Yeah, I get that. I understand that, and yes, there's a very real possibility that could happen again. It's football. It's part of the game, and that's a very violent position. You have to be as active in run support as you are in pass coverage, and it's a difficult position to play and a difficult position to remain healthy at. So
that's right.
I would expect more depth to be added. I don't know how impactful those signings would be, though.
Yeah, Joshua says Peyton Wilson is the closest plug and play the Steelers drafted. He played 5 years in college. As Mike Tomlin would say, turn on the tape. Or as Terrell Austin would say, turn on the tape. Like Peyton Wilson's tape. I watched him play at NC State. Peyton Wilson's tape doesn't lie. He's everywhere. Watch every play he's in. He's everywhere. And just so we can clear the air on spelling, it's P-A-Y. Not to call you out, Joshua. P-A-Y-T-O-N. So let's try to remember that one.
Dude can move, man. He's the most. I don't think this is at all like reaching or hyperbole or anything like that, but he is by far the most athletic inside linebacker they've had since Shazier. And even then, like when you look at like measurables, if you compare Shazier and Peyton Wilson when they were coming out of college in terms of their actual like measurables, like in terms of height, weight, 40 speed, all this, like all that stuff, like they are very, very similar. Shazier's got a bit of an edge on a good amount of stuff. But like he had a bit of a higher vertical. He was a little bit faster. Shazier, God, dude, that dude was a freak.
Yeah.
But Peyton Wilson, if the knees, if the health issues are not issues, that's the steal of the draft, the entire NFL draft for the value that you'd get.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Good question from Brian. I think we can end on here. What player do you think exceeded expectations last season? For him, it was Landon Roberts. For me, it was Keanu Benton. Like, I think he was expected to come in and contribute, but not in the way that he did. I think he was way better than what a lot anticipated out of him last year. That would be my answer to that question, Keanu Benton.
That's interesting. I have a couple. Landon Roberts, I was surprised with how good he was in pass coverage. Not saying that he was good in pass coverage, but FF grades and stuff like that, again, take those with a grain of salt. But even then, when you looked at the tape and stuff like that, you saw a liability in pass coverage, and that was not as much the case. I was a bit surprised about that, but I'm going to go with Joey Porter Jr., and that's only because he, as a rookie, not even as a rookie, like starting the entire season, but earned the right to follow the team's number one receiver week in and week out, was given that trust. Mike Tomlin doesn't do that with anybody. Joe Hayden had it a little bit here and there. Ike Taylor was the last one to really have that kind of responsibility to be like, we're playing the Bengals this week. You got Chad Ochocinco. Yeah. No matter what, you follow him around. Joey Porter Jr. was given that as a rookie. To me, I thought he would have a good rookie season. I thought he'd come in and possibly be their most impactful rookie, and he was. But to be given that kind of trust, that to me speaks volumes of, I didn't expect that. That to me is like, whoa. okay, this dude might be a lot closer to being a legitimate shutdown corner than we expected him to be. I thought like before we started putting that kind of label on Porter, it would have to be at least a season, maybe halfway into the second season to be like, okay, that dude's a shutdown corner. But we already saw that as a rookie. So I would say Joey Porter Jr. really exceeded my expectations in terms of here are the keys to being the legitimate number one shutdown corner as a rookie.
A game that I'll never forget ever is the Steelers-Ravens game right before the bye week. That was the Joey Porter Jr. coming out party.
Yeah.
It was, he shadowed Odell Beckham throughout that game and then had that interception to seal things late. Like that to me was the Joey Porter Jr. coming out party. And from there, he just was on this ascend.
Yeah. And he got better at tackling too.
Yep.
Like you look at his missed tackle percentage down the stretch. It was like 15% or something like that. It was like there were linebackers in the league. Like I think Patrick Queen had a higher missed tackle rate than Joey Porter Jr. did once Porter became a starter. It's like, yeah, early on you're like, oh my God, like this dude's got to clean up. Like I remember watching and covering the Houston game. I'm like, this dude's got to learn how to tackle at the NFL level. Like it's going to be a problem. And he got way better at that down the stretch, while also, as I've said already and hammered, I'll continue to hammer it home. Like doesn't matter who they were playing. DK Metcalf, that's your guy. You know, DeAndre Hopkins, that's your guy.
Yep.
And the numbers were very, very good for a rookie. He deserved to be a nominee for Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, he certainly, I mean, he played up to expectations. A lot of people in the comments to that question said Mason Rudolph. Of course, like,
well, yeah.
When you have no expectations and you outperform nothing, then, you know, I suppose so. Marcus says Isaac, he's not saying he's attempting the last name, but I believe he's talking about Sayamalo.
I think expectations were pretty high for him just because of the contract that was given. And so I expected him to come in and be the best offensive lineman in that unit, and he was.
Mm-hmm. He knows, and Joey Jr. knows about they shot me in Denver, by the way. I think it was right before they were playing, right before they went to the Bills to the postseason game. You know, Joey Jr. was asked, what's your favorite postseason memory of your dad? And I think he said they shot me in Denver was his favorite.
Yeah, whenever, right before or right after they won the game against the Colts, or the game against the Colts in the 05 divisional round, and then obviously went on to the AFC Championship in Denver. So, yeah.
All right, Chris, since you joined late, do you have anything to add?
No, I just continue to when you hear Omar Khan go on Pat McAfee, shoot down the rumors, and then he follows up the very next morning, goes on WDVE and shoots down the rumors again. Like, I'm not saying that nothing's happening. I mean, he even said conversations happen. That's what GMs do. I just expect patience in the trade market. So I expect the Steelers to add to the receiver room at some point, but patience. That's my advice for the day. Just patience. If something happens later today, then great. But if it doesn't happen for 2 or 3 weeks, don't be surprised.
Yep. If I had a final thought, it would be, hey, Ben Cherington, what are we waiting for?
Dude, is an 0.39 ERA, man, at AAA. I mean, I understand, like, you go to AAA to be like, okay, let's give him a good, good test. Let's see how he holds up against the AAA arms. I mean, dude, he's not growing anymore in Indianapolis. He's just not.
Nope.
He's only going to grow by playing against major league hitters. That's just, you've seen a big enough sample size now. 0.39 ERA through in May.
What's funny is with that statement, I could have been talking about one of maybe about a dozen players there, people rather, maybe even a certain hitting coach, but yeah.
Well, that's a horse of a different color.
I could have been talking about Nick Gonzalez. I could have been talking about Grandal. I could have been talking about Malcolm Nunez. I could have been talking about G1 Bay. Skeens, certainly. There's a lot of players I could have, a lot of people I could have mentioned there.
Randy brings it up here, and we could tie a nice little Steelers bow on this. Yeah. When do we start hearing the Fire Haynes chants? Fire Andy Haynes chants? Because we heard the Fire Matt Canada chants all the way in Utah before college football games.
Yeah.
When do we start hearing, I'm just wondering if Andy Haynes is still the hitting coach. if he's still the hitting coach by the time the Pirates come back to town, like when do we start hearing the fire Haynes fire?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
What if, like, okay, so that all started with the whole Fire Canada thing started with Penguins crowds.
Yeah.
Like, if the Penguins are still in the postseason, would we have that? Or would people care as much?
It's all the Penguins' fault. Dadgummit, Hextall.
Don't get started. Yeah, Eric, this is a football podcast, but sometimes we can branch off into other things.
It's also right at the end of the show. We're
It's
like
fine.
we could have already ended it by now. We're just having some fun.
It's fine, guys. Come on. I'm wearing a minor league baseball hat. Come on. It's fine. I promise. We'll get
I'm
back
wearing
to
my Dallas Maverick shirt today to get ready. It's a big night for Dallas sports fans. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Mavericks game 5 and Stars game 5.
This is a Syracuse Chiefs hat. They are now.
Randy, by the way, we want to talk about football. Let's talk about football.
Yeah, actual football.
The River Hounds.
The Hounds
we are bringing
back.
coverage back to DKPittsburghSports.com for River Hounds. Corey is going to be on the scene for that. I'm a little excited about that for sure.
I'll be there tomorrow.
I'm a big fan of association football.
Yeah,
and so and yes, it is called football. I'm gonna be a snob.
Global football.
I'm gonna be.
This is American football.
I'm gonna be a snob. I'm gonna be a snob about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's really cool. That you know they're a really good club, and they deserve more attention for sure. And they're selling out the Highmark Stadium. So good stuff, man. I'm excited about that.
I'll be there tomorrow to get a little introduction, and then I'm going Saturday to check the game out. So that'll be
River Hands.
Yeah, that'll be fun to check out. So check out the coverage on that. There's a feed set up on DKPittsburghSports.com that you'll want to hit. We're going to have fun with that. That'll be a fun one to do.
Yep.
But we'll get out of here today. We'll be back tomorrow. I think DK and Ramon today. I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't see like a show, cue or a upcoming or a teaser or anything. CJ says more excuses for Corey to be absent. That's not my department, CJ. That's not my department. I just go where I'm told. I go where I'm told. Where I'm told.
That's funny. I'm trying to think.
The Pittsburgh Wilsons. There you go, Josh. It's American football. If the NFL is not called football, what should they be called? It's American football.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that American football shouldn't be called football.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I typically call soccer football because that's what it is. That's what it is everywhere else.
Yeah,
like everywhere else in the world, you call it soccer. I think maybe Australia is like the only other country that calls it soccer or something. I don't know which country it is, but then if you go to the UK and you call it soccer, that yank.
Gridiron. Thank you, Brian. Gridiron would be the other thing. So there you go.
All right.
I do believe,
and there's different names for the field. It's the gridiron in American football, and then it's the pitch in soccer.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right.
I do believe we're having a DK and Ramon today at 4. So stay tuned for that. We will be back tomorrow, 3 Eastern on Thursday on May 2nd. It's almost Star Wars Day for you nerds out there. Look at me talking.
My wife's retirement ceremony from 20 years in the Navy is Saturday, which is on May the 4th. And so and we're also going to do a fun run, a Star Wars themed fun run that evening. So retirement ceremony in the afternoon, Star Wars themed fun run in the evening. It's going to be a day to celebrate.
Star Wars has been on quite the roller coaster. I'll just leave it at that. But until then.
Oh, Barbara got the answer. American football as like association or sockation or whatever, is they call them soccers. Get it. Understand it. Interesting.
There you go. All right. Let's do American football tomorrow.
Yes,
He's
American
Chris.
football.
I'm Corey. This has been the Southside Beat. Have a good day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Cheers.